This is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful engineering leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode is brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications from design to delivery with React, Node.js, and Angular. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Hello, everyone. It is very nice to be here. I am Karolina Toth, host of the Level Up Engineering Podcast, and today I have another exciting guest from the world of IT. Today, I am here with Morgan Teachworth. He is VP of Engineering and Supply Chain at Cisco Meraki. And before we jump into today's topic, I will ask Morgan to tell us a bit about himself and what he does.
And thank you for having me here today. I'm Morgan Teachworth, and I've been with Cisco Meraki since Meraki's beginning in 2006. So I'm the VP of Engineering and Supply Chain, looking after both the hardware development as well as manufacturing, quality, pretty much full life cycle for the physical products that Meraki makes as part of Cisco.
Mm-hmm. Sounds cool. And what do you do in your free time? Anything to share with our audience?
Well, in my free time, work keeps me pretty busy. I work on my house. I garden a little bit. I work in technology, so when I come home, I want to step back to maybe an older activity, something that's a little bit less wires and electrons, and just get my hands dirty.
Thank you. That gives us a little bit of insight into how you are in the world. Today, we have a really exciting topic, building and running teams that prioritize innovation. I think everybody in this day and age can relate with, just thinking about moving forward all the time and coming up with new ideas. How do you define innovation in your daily life?
I think it's important to think about innovation as a spectrum. Sometimes when people think about innovation, they're looking for that moonshot, that completely new idea or something that breaks the mold. And every once in a while, every generation, there are a few of these, but really innovation and building a team that can focus on it requires us to think about it as small accretive changes. It's doing something new with something you already have, or it's going and finding something new. So it can be, it can be a product innovation, a small change generation to generation, or it can be a product market fit or an offering change that just modifies the way. So, in general, kind of in a nutshell, it's change, positive change in either the way we work or the products that we're shipping that's, driven outside of whatever the core roadmap or core waterfall or strict definition is. Innovation is always a little bit surprising.
I love that. Do you have that as a core value in your team?
I think one of the core values in our team is simplifying everything. Mm-hmm. And when you think about simplifying, that almost requires innovation. So in order for us to serve one of our core purposes or one of our core values, if you're simplifying the way you work or the processes and tasks, but by definition, you are going to have to change, and you're going to have to change in ways that are unexpected. And if you're going out to simplify a product, you're going to make changes to it that make it easier for customers to use or make it more accessible. And, those are things that are hard to capture in a PRD or a specification doc. But when you sit down, you can see, this isn't simple. We need to do something here. What might we do? So the value is really embedded in that idea that we're always asking ourselves that question, how might we, or what might we do here? That goes beyond the original box that was drawn for any specific challenge.
And so when you talk about this in your team, how do you encourage people to take part in this kind of thinking?
You have to give space for it. And so I think what you want to do is what we do, we leave some time in any given forum to sort of like ask the questions that are out of scope. You want to take and pull back. I don't want to say pull back to first principles, but like open up a space for just a little bit of crazy. Ask a dumb question, ask a silly question. You want to, if you leave a little bit of room for fun in there, you give people the chance to do it. And once an idea starts, you really want to lean into can we test that? Can we try that? Right? You can have 100 ideas, but if you don't try any of them, innovation is not going to happen. So, creating either, lab space for free work or time in folks' schedules, or even if it's a large enough idea, having a pool of, easily accessible funding that people can use to go try something out. Sometimes, the block to innovation in some organizations is, I can't even afford one more proto. Like every coffee bean has to be accounted for, so I can't go and try and make a new drink, But if you just loosen things up a little bit, and that requires sort of managing a little bit of slop in the organization, you'll find that a lot of creativity happens in that open space, in that white space that you provide.
This even sounds like this is embedded in the company. It like has to be encouraged company-wide so that people can take advantage of that little slack, as you said.
It has to be encouraged company-wide, and it has to go beyond the management push down, right? Like managers can sit up on the stage in a panel and talk about innovation. They can say, we believe in it, we want to see it done. But at the end of the day, it's the team itself, the members of the team that like recognize when somebody has a good idea, or they show some appreciation for an experiment, whether it's a successful experiment or a failure. They celebrate each other as employees and individuals. And, this isn't even formal recognition. It's not like we're giving each other certificates or giving each other cash awards, but just giving each other, I think, attention. It validates the culture of experimentation. That you have to do the next level of that as a leader, and, maybe formally recognize or call out in a meeting an experiment, like I said, good or bad, pass or fail sometimes. But if you want a culture of innovation, you can't rely that like the leadership is going to see every little thing that's tried and recognize it. Like we can see a few and we can recognize a few, and that sets the temperature. But in order for it to really be the air that the team lives and breathes, they have to recognize it and value it in each other. So it's driving, the space for innovation, the culture for innovation, but it's also just a cultural value of appreciation for each other and consideration for people's time and effort in things that are strictly tied to some KPI and organizational goal, but also the things that absolutely aren't, right? And, like innovation in a technical space comes from all sorts of interesting places. It comes from people's backgrounds. It comes from people's hobbies. It comes from other industries that they've worked in. So like being open to and appreciating these things that like don't fit exactly into the story is super important, just as a cultural element. And it leads naturally to an ability to innovate and foster innovation in the organization.
I love that. You mentioned some maybe not really rituals, but like habits of leaders, of recognizing each other's innovative ideas or their effort put towards innovation. Do you have some processes or rituals that are maybe easier to implement for some of our listeners that they can put to use right away?
So one of the things that we do is, so we call a program that's been started purely for innovation, a black op, something that's not funded. It's not like formally across the entire organization. It's kind of core to our team. And we have a little council that reviews basically applications to initiate and fund one of these experiments. And the applications or the chance to sit with a couple of leaders and present to that, it's available to everyone. It's really easy. It's like a Google form that they can put in. And what we find is that not every little innovation in the organization needs to come to this council. That needs to come to this decision that not every idea is a great idea, but everyone knows that a good idea that's got a little bit of purchase, that has some support in the org, can go and become an actual experiment that we're going to see through to some milestone. So when people are working together, they have the ritual of thinking, hey, is this idea, is it good enough? Have we done enough work on it? Are we ready to take this up to, the monthly or quarterly review? And that's a process. That's some airtime. You get to sit on the stage for a minute. You have to organize all the scattered work you've done into a pitch. It's a VC pitch. It's an elevator pitch. And the fact that we have this flow, you have the tiny innovations that may or may not make it, and that there's a process for funneling them up to full legitimization, that's always in everybody's mind. And I think any organization can create something, similar to that. If you have any time at all to spend reviewing innovation and people know how to do it and the barrier to entry is not high, it's going to be a focus when they're working on their own or when they're working with their peers. They know what the next step is, and they're not afraid that what they're working on is going to get lost.
It sounds like a very holistic approach to innovation. I love the process of this. Maybe to me, it sounds like an iterative process where as you put in more work, you know what the next steps are, and you can check back and see how your last pitch went. How do you build teams that are of this mindset? What are some qualities that you look for in people, or do you not put this into the hiring expectations at all and say you teach this to people?
I think you can teach it to anybody. So you don't have to hire it in on every single hire. One thing that you want to look for as you're building organization is people who have energy. I often observe it in an interview as kind of a restless energy, and a curiosity that goes beyond what their core job is to how it's done or how the next team over does its work. Because a lot of the innovation that we see, it falls in the cracks between the areas of the company that are extremely well organized. So if you hire folks in who have a little bit of restlessness and curiosity, they're going to start to drive and ask the questions. But if everyone you hire, absolutely every person that you hire in has this in buckets, then you have a whole team of chaos that's bouncing around, curious about everything, but not really focused. So it's important to have a mix. If you have none of it, it's going to be a problem. And if you have everything, it's going to be a problem. When you have a mix, you can take folks who aren't naturally bent this way, and I don't want to say train, but basically encourage or show them that those behaviors are appreciated and that there's a space for them to participate in it, right? It's I think of these folks as sort of shy to the innovation table. They still want to be there, but they're a little bit shy. So it's important to have a few folks who are just, they jump into the water, they look and then they jump, and they tend to bring the rest of the team along with them. the danger, the dark side of the coin of a very, very innovative organization is people can get over focused on innovation to the detriment of like the core work that actually has to be done. And if the core work starts to suffer, then leadership has to like pull back on innovation, and that can, it's very, very easy to overcorrect. So, it's important to run at a healthy level and a healthy level of interest. If you have so much innovation that it's exploding, right? You've got weeds growing everywhere. Maybe you need to, cut it out and make a R&D org or a separate org that's focused. You see this a lot in like CTO, special technology organizations, but even like that's the end state of maybe a little bit too much. But even then, you're back to trying to maintain a modest amount in every organization, because you don't want to segment innovation away to one special place where it has to go. So you have to be really careful about that mean.
Right, anyway. Right. Do you mind if we dig in a little more as to how do you make sure that innovation is a priority, but it doesn't go above the importance of the daily work? What are some of your, I guess, expectation management techniques for your team?
This is the boring part of running a team that's innovative is the check-ins on just the normal work. Like, is the normal flow getting done? Are we hitting our requirements, and are we hitting our milestones? On a product or a process, like if you've layered exciting innovation on it, but that car does not drive, you haven't actually succeeded at your mission. So like it's core to like repeating in your touch points or repeating in the way that you measure progress that, there's a high bar, which is success. And then there's innovation, which is done on top of that, next to that. It's sometimes what you get is you get a request to do, or you get an innovation that's aimed at a core feature or product. And you say, well, this seems like a good idea. Let's try it. And it comes back later and they're like, well, we can't deliver on the project. We're too busy working on this innovation, or like the innovation, it's so close, this new thing we want to try, like we need to delay 3 months, 6 months just to like try and finish this part. And you say, guys, like, no, like we needed to keep a healthy gulf between like the goals and the innovation. And like, you can catch the innovation on the next spin. Like you can catch this on the next cycle. You had a chance. And so what we have when we legitimize a project as a specific proof of concept or specifically an innovation concept is we set a budget, what we're able to spend on it. And then we also set at the beginning what I call the win, lose, or stop conditions. And the idea here is like, at some point you've won the innovation, like you've rolled it in, or you've proven it's possible. You've built your proof of concept. You've successfully got it in. Boom, you win. Like, great. There's lose. Like at some point, maybe you tried and you failed, and you have evidence of failure, or you had a certain amount of time, but like, you failed. I'm sorry. It was a good try. We can talk about trying again. But what's really important is the stop condition. The stop condition is where, well, you haven't won and you haven't lost. You're kind of in limbo, but team, you need to stop. Like it's important for us to put this one back on the shelf, like finish our work or move on to the next thing we need to do. And you can come back to it as is. But for now, like it's not going to make it in this release. I think in software organizations, this is in agile software development, this is done very easily. It's like, oh, we'll put it in the next sprint, right? With hardware development, the cycles can be really long. Missing an opportunity means you're going to wait potentially years before you see this roll in, or, with a process and tool development, same years because you've missed it. So it hurts. And it's really tempting to like break your rules that you set for yourself on that stop condition. You have to resist. Like you have to resist. You have to hold yourself to accountable to when is the right time to like put this one back, maybe come back to it later, but focus and ship.
And I am pretty sure that's what great leaders are for. So they know when to stop. And
it's so painful to have to enforce that on your team, right? Like, I mean, the dream is you set these conditions, the team is so self-aware that they see it and they do the right thing. But you're right. Sometimes leadership has to come in and like, sometimes you feel like a real jerk. You're like, oh, you're so close, but you didn't make it. Aw, but that's the job, right? And people are going to grumble about it and say you're a punk. And like, if only Morgan had let me do just one more week, we would have got it. Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Yeah. and
Sure.
it's important to recognize that the almost wins. Like, of course, when you have a win, you're like, yes, we did it. And when you have a fail, you're like, we're going to recognize this fail and like, good try, everybody. But the stop is just important. It's like we got real close. Like, we're going to come back to it. I promise. Like, it's still a good idea. We're still close. Like, we just need the space. We're going to maybe even treat it like a win, right? Yeah, throw a stop party. I don't know. But it's important. A lot of the times, the stop conditions kind of, they get lost in between the wins and the losses. Mm-hmm. And so they're important to have, and it's important not to forget to treat them equally to the wins and the losses.
Right. It almost sounds like a growth mindset sort of activity for me when you say stop should be appreciated at some points. It's like, that sounds like the effort that people put in but didn't quite bear fruit is also important, because the effort is what makes innovation happen when it is successful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think everybody thinks of the innovation as being just a lot of hard work, and like people want to see their hard work come to fruition. But it's important to recognize that like sometimes hard work is its own reward. That's like the worst thing a manager can tell somebody. Don't say that to your employees. Hard work is its own reward. In the same way, like the reward for hard work is more hard work. But in reality, especially in unknown and innovation space, like there is going to be a lot of energy spent on things that don't pan out. Or on a lot of energy spent that leads to the need that opens up the gate to spending a ton more energy. That has to be recognized as a good thing for the organization. And that's a hard thing to get people to really, really believe. Right.
We kind of have been touching on this point a little bit, but I am going on the measurement side. We have specifically said, there should be a point when something is unsuccessful and when something has reached its success, and somewhere in the middle as well. How can you measure how innovative a team might be, or can you measure how innovative a team is?
It's hard to measure innovation. It's like trying to measure creativity. I think from a pure administrative point of view, if you're setting money aside for innovation and it's not getting spent, then you can say, well, maybe we could turn it up. Like we've got space to turn it up, but it doesn't mean you don't have innovation. It just means that they're doing it cheaply. I don't know, but it's an indication. In the same way, I think, it's a very qualitative measurement. If you want to take the temperature of how much innovation is happening in a team, you really have to look at what kinds of questions are they asking, right? Are they asking questions? And you have to measure this across a lot of different forums, in your AMAs, in your, one-on-ones, career like in conversations, in peer reviews. Like, do you overall have a culture of curiosity? If you don't think you do, then likely you haven't fostered a culture that has innovation. But how are you actually like measuring innovation versus creativity? How do you measure fun? You know it when you see it. So I would be open to, measurements, honest metrics for innovation. I'm always looking for that. It's tough to do. Once you start to measure innovation, people start to game for innovation. Like they start to game for the measurement system. Or game for rewards that are tied to a measurement system. You become, with any KPI, like a company becomes what it measures. So, of course, we want to measure innovation, but because then we will become innovative. But the fact is when you put structure, the more and more structure you put around on it, the more it becomes work, the regular flow.
Right.
And the harder it is to keep it in that free space that goes beyond what your deliverables are. Once you measure it, you have a deliverable attached to it. And then, oh my goodness, like it
defeats the purpose.
It's tough.
Yes.
It kind of defeats the purpose, or it sours the party. It's like walking around a party and asking everybody to take a survey about how fun the party is. Like mood killer, right?
I love that. I think I might do that at my next birthday. That's cool to all of our listeners and watchers. I think this is a perfect place to say, if you have any measurements for innovation that have worked for you, then go ahead and reach out to Level Up Engineering on Twitter and say so, and we will make sure that your highlights get highlighted even more. Okay, moving on. Are there any common mistakes that you have seen when it comes to innovation? You already pointed out that sometimes it's hard to stop when you are so close. What are some other things that people leaders should watch out for?
Yeah. All right. So I work with an engineering team. And one of the things that I find engineering teams love is just pure technology. There is a new technology, a new standard, a new function that you can roll into a product. And there's always a bunch, and you just have a team that wants to cram so much in. You want a new button for everything. You want a new function for everything. And this is the question, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? But an engineering team is just so good at convincing itself that there's a should, like rationalizing why we need to do this high technology innovation. It's easy. It's too much. And at the end of the day, like, I've seen products that could be very simple. Imagine an old digital camera. Like, some of them, you have a button, you press the button, it takes a picture. And others, you have 100 buttons on the back, change the settings, do this. You pick it up and you're like, I don't know how to take a picture. Like, or, when phones first got smart, people were like, I just need this to make a phone call and I can't even find the call button, right? Now, over time, you innovate away the extra cruft that makes it a bad product. But in the innovation cycle, there's a strong possibility for an engineering team to just try and cram too much in that they love. That's not necessarily going to be something that the market loves, that the customer loves, or that a customer even knows how to use. I think anybody who's been in product design has designed like a piece of a product, and you pick it up and you're like, this is very simple. You just do this and it's perfect. And then you hand it to somebody and they're like, wait, what? Nope, I can't use, I'm not interested. And you're like, no, it's really easy. Just like that, it's done. Teams do that. Like they get in a kind of a bubble. They make something that's perfect for them, but not necessarily perfect for the outside. And it's innovation, but it's not innovation that turns into a truly innovative offering. I think that tendency is probably one of the most counterproductive that I've seen in engineering team innovations.
I think that's a really great example, and very, very eye-opening if some people are right now in the process of trying to innovate more in their teams. Do you have some practices that you can share with us to maybe counter this bubbling effect? What, for example, if you do anything with your teams?
So in any small group that's working on a product, the engineers are going crazy. You just need to bring in anyone from outside. It doesn't have to be a customer test. It just has to be a different group brings in someone to participate in the process, someone level-headed out of any non-technical organization to sit and look at what's happening and call it out and be like, all right, folks, we're being dumb here. This has gone too far. And it's really hard. Engineering managers are bad at making this call, right? They're just as excited as their team about it. Really having a functionally diverse group of people working on that early on, before it goes too far, tends to pull back on that mistake in a pretty legitimate way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think we can definitely use that with our teams, and we are almost out of our time. So I will ask you to perhaps share a story with us if you have. I think you might have some stories from your long tenure at the company. A story of building an innovation-centered team, perhaps from scratch or from a team that hasn't been so innovative. How did you get started? What were some of your first steps?
Yeah. For that one, I'll go back to the very, very early days of Meraki, or any of the times when I've been on a really, really small team. People think of innovation as something that's done inside a company or inside a community that's built within a company. But when you're just starting to build a team, when it's small, you don't have the ecosystem for that. You have a couple of folks, they have a ton of curiosity, they have ideas that they want to try, they want to own these ideas, and they want to do it. And in a bigger company, it would be, you'd bring in some resources, you'd start filing patents right away. But when you're really small, your team is bigger than just the company. It is your partners that you work with, it's your vendor community, it's friends, people that don't work with you, but just others. And that means that some of those early ideas or some of that early fostering of innovation are not going to be easy to protect. They might be fantastic IP, but they're never going to see the light of day if you aren't willing to, involve other groups. And so early Meraki, I was by myself. I was working on a lot of products. Maybe I had a team of one other person in hardware. I was working with some of our early small vendors and asking them to put some of their time and energy on the line to pursue these innovations that I wanted to try out. And, I had to pick a partner that had an innovative culture, so I had to look for that. But then once we started to do things together, I had to admit that what we were working on was never going to be wholly owned by me. That we were creating an innovation that at the end of the day was going to contribute to my product, but was going to end up being a gift to the world. It's a very grandiose way to think about it, but whatever we developed was going to get out there. It was going to get reused by the vendor, other customer, or other competitors might adopt it. And in fact, I saw some of that in the early days, the work that we did on outdoor wireless and some innovation we did on connectors early on. I was too small to keep it to myself, and it got adopted and spread through the industry. I like to see that as a big company. You want to lock that down and make some money off of it. But I think when you're just starting out, if you don't open up to the broader community, you may never be able to get sufficient energy and sort of get over those first early hurdles to be able to start building out an internal team or building out an internal culture. In many ways, we borrow elements of our culture from the people around us. That is so, so true when you're trying to kick off an organization from scratch.
Right. I think you made me think of a quote from Lao Tzu. I think he says, the artist who doesn't keep it to themselves will never lose the art that they made, or something like that. And your story made me think of that quote. If you can get into a little more specifics, how was your first innovative team? Can you pinpoint it down, or was it just the kind of the company culture that you can recall?
So the first innovative team out of Meraki was built out of folks who, it was their first startup, for a few of them, their first or second job. It's not necessary to building an innovative team, but for us, it happened naturally because we did not know what was supposed to be impossible. So we would go out to our community and we would ask for things that an experienced engineer would not ask for on a product design. We want to try this, and you'd get a look and they'd be like, that's a really stupid thing to ask for. And you'd be like, well, I respect that you think it's a really stupid thing to ask for, but I'd really like to understand why. And then in digging through the why, well, you'd actually find some places where there were some tweaks you could make. Maybe you didn't get everything you wanted, but you got a little bit. So like having that team in the beginning that like didn't know what they weren't supposed to do, that sort of naturally fed into it. Not all teams can get away with that. Like not all organizations can afford a period of time where like they don't know the limits of their process. Like goodness sakes, go innovate in silicon and ASICs and not know what you're doing and have a terrible time and spend $1 billion. No, don't do that. Like, but I think at the end of the day, part of that curiosity is, not knowing what you don't know. Right? Mm-hmm. Or even like it's a combination of not knowing what you don't know, like knowing what you don't know, but in all cases, like being willing to ask questions and learn, and not to always accept the answer up front. Right? Mm-hmm. The team was young. It had a healthy distrust of authority. I'm going to say that like healthy distrust of authority and healthy distrust of like exactly what it says on the spec sheet or the product spec or the program spec, like that helps. Mm-hmm. And I think, in building out a fresh org, you can start with that, or you can stir a little bit of that in the pot, and it puts you in a good place to build an innovative culture as you go.
I think that's awesome. We have touched on a lot of topics about building an innovative team. For me, the most important aspects were celebrating the losses and celebrating the wins, but also not forgetting to celebrate about the stops and making sure that people expect that they will be stopped at one point if they are unsuccessful. And even if they are successful, they might be stopped and they might have to get to work. With that said, I think one of the other really important aspects of our conversation was for me to make sure that people know where the line is between the daily operative work and the innovation that is fostered by the culture, but isn't the actual work that needs to be done. And even though innovation might be a top priority, it shouldn't come before the work that needs to be done. We also talked about some of the mistakes that might be made. And I think you're very much on point with engineering teams getting really caught up with the newest technology and the shiniest tools they can use. And there, I think it's really important for a leader to make sure that they can be that safeguard for the team to get the work done that needs to be done. And also, thank you for sharing your stories. I think that highlighted that a mix of people is really nice when it comes to innovation. If you just get, as you said in the beginning, if you just get, one sort of person, then it might be a big chaos. And if you just get another sort of person, then it might be unable to innovate. So it should be a mix of people, and that will give you the necessary number of perspectives to innovate and be successful at it. We have covered a lot of ground, as I said. Morgan, do you have anything else that you'd like to add and our listeners to know?
I think I'll just cap it off with it's human nature to innovate. Like, in reality, a lot of work goes into a company structure and a system that prevents people from innovating, right? So, like, let your people be a little bit free. Like, open it up, and you will naturally foster innovation in the organization.
How awesome. You make it sound easier than it might be. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners get in touch with you or follow your work?
The best place is LinkedIn. I'm MTeachW at LinkedIn, or you can just look me up by name, Morgan Teachworth.
Thank you so much. Dearest audience of Level Up Engineering, I am so happy that you are here. I am Karolina Tóth, and today my guest was Morgan Teachworth, VP of Engineering and Supply Chain at Cisco Meraki. And we've had a quite awesome conversation about building and running teams that prioritize innovation. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or if you have taken some practices and implemented them successfully. I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.